to today's DreamWakers Daily Conversation. I am so excited for our special guest speaker today, Miss Caroline Modarressy-Tehrani. She is an Emmy Award nominated television correspondent and news producer, and it is just such a pleasure to have you. Thank you for taking the time to answer all of our students and teachers' questions today.
Oh, thanks, Erin. It's so nice to see you. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone is staying safe during this kind of unprecedented time. But, I'm glad that we're doing this. Feels like a really positive thing to be doing because even though the world is going through this challenging situation, like life can't stop, right? Like we still have to be thinking about our futures and thinking ahead. So I'm so glad that you guys are doing this.
Thank you so much. Amazing words of wisdom there. So I have to admit, it's a little nerve-wracking being an interviewer, interviewing an expert interviewer. So I'm going to start off with an easy question. Just for the benefit of everyone watching, you have a very, very impressive portfolio. You've worked as an on-air host and producer for HuffPost Live. You've been a correspondent for Vice News Tonight. And that's not even mentioning all of the off-screen work you do, writing and just contributing to a lot of different publications. So I was wondering if you could elaborate in your own words what your story is and what a workday looks like for you.
Sure. The workday bit is a bit tricky, so I'll get to that in a second. In terms of my story, I started in newspapers. So, I'm on TV now, but I was always I started my kind of career in newspapers back in the UK. So I worked for different publications. I did different jobs for the newspapers in various different sections of editorial. And, I think I started like a lot of people where I did a lot of unpaid internships. So I really had to work my way up because I didn't have, a family member. I didn't have any sort of real connections that were in the industry. So for me, it was really, it felt kind of daunting, the idea of sort of like breaking into journalism. Like, what does that mean? I admired sort of these newspapers and these publications for many years, but the idea of kind of breaking into it always felt a little bit daunting. But for me personally, doing these internships, although it was annoying that they were unpaid, I was lucky to be able to live with my parents during that time, so God bless them. But it was really invaluable because you're in the workings of a magazine. In my case, I was an intern for ID magazine, which is a very cool fashion magazine. I also interned for Prospect magazine, which was a political magazine. So I also wasn't sure at the beginning what I wanted to do, like which area of journalism I really wanted to kind of focus on. So I highly recommend if anyone is just sort of starting their journey or thinking about, I might be interested in journalism, don't worry about having to kind of like be on a specific track. Don't think that, just because I dabbled in fashion doesn't mean I can never switch to politics, for example. Like in my experience, that's not true. I think getting experience wherever you can has been really useful. And my journalism experience in newspapers really helped pave the way for me to be able to excel in broadcast because a lot of the same foundations that you need for print journalism really serve you well for TV journalism. And I know we'll get into that a little bit later. But in terms of a day in the life, for me, a day in the life is totally varied. I've been a producer, I've been a host in a studio, I've been a correspondent out in the field reporting on breaking news stories and, having a to-go bag under my desk so that I'd be ready to be deployed at the drop of a hat if there was a breaking news story, if there was like a hurricane, for example, or a flood or anything like that. I've been in that situation. The day in the life for a journalist is a little bit tricky sometimes to kind of try and think, well, I wake up and I eat breakfast and then I have these calls and then I have lunch. It's not quite like that, but I have to say that's part of what makes me excited about my job. I love my job for that. I enjoy the sort of variety that comes with it. The backbone of every single day, though, is kind of what we're doing here. It's communication. It's talking to people. It's often on the phone, or it's over at a Zoom conference call or a Google Hangout. I think communication is sort of the fundamental building block, really, of any day in any journalist's life, or like whatever the field that they're in.
Awesome. Well, I have to admit there were so many community submitted questions for you. Everyone's really curious, so I guess we'll just dive right into those. Our first one comes from a middle schooler down in New Mexico who just wants to know, was there a key moment in your life what really inspired you to pursue journalism, and is this something that you knew you wanted to pursue when you were in school, or something that you kind of discovered along the way?
So I'm not one of those people that was sort of, popped out of the womb and then was like, I will be a journalist. That's what I'm going to be. So I unfortunately don't have that. I don't have that story. It wasn't sort of like in my blood and bones from day one. But I will say that, I was always interested in school. Reading and writing was sort of, my main passions. We had a small debate club at one point, so I was like, doing debate, and I like talking. So if you like talking and want to be paid for it, being a journalist is a pretty good career path to follow. But I sort of didn't really think about it at the time, but I get asked this question a lot. And I was actually sort of thinking and reflecting upon my high school days. And, I started a music magazine when I was in high school. We had a festival that was at our high school. It was kind of like a take on Woodstock. And I sort of was, the editor of this magazine that was accompanying the festival. And I never really thought about that as sort of like the start of my interest in journalism. But I think that actually looking back on it when I was sort of 16, 17, that's kind of where it all started. So, yeah, I think that it's really good to sort of follow your passion projects in high school. Like if you do have a passion for debate, for writing, for kind of trying these things out, high school's a really good place to start. And then I think from then on, I think I followed a pretty traditional path for a lot of my fellow journalists. I was part of the student paper when I was at university. I did a radio show at university as well. I really just wanted to kind of try out different elements of the field, but I really didn't do it in a conscious way. I wish I could pretend that it was all part of my grand plan, but I just did it because I enjoyed it. It just seemed like fun to me. And, college can be tough and university could be tough and it's long hours and, it's a lot of work for people. And so for me, it always just seemed like this was fun. And yeah, then it sort of just turned into a career, but there wasn't sort of a single lightning bolt moment where I thought, that's what I'm going to be.
Well, I think that's
the one thing I would say. Don't worry if you're sitting at, if you're sitting in middle school or high school and you're sitting yourself and you're thinking, wow, so-and-so, my best friend really wants to be a doctor, or this person really wants to be a web designer or whatever, but I don't know what I want to do. Don't panic, because you've plenty of time to figure it out. And the nice thing about, I feel I don't know about you, Erin, but I feel one of the best things about our generation, well, you're younger than me, but our sort of collective generation is that we don't have to have one specific career and then that's it. I feel we really are blessed in this current day and age to be able to experiment with different careers. So, you're not really going to make a mistake. You can try things out.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and I hope this middle schooler in New Mexico and all the students watching just really take that to heart. It's so important to find something that you're really passionate about, something that you have fun with, and knowing that you don't have to know right off the bat. Our next question is actually one I think we're all dying to know, but it comes from a 12th grader in Riverdale, Georgia, and they want to know, of all the stories and interviews that you've worked on, which has been your favorite and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, so I mean, I've done a lot of different interviews over the course of my career, and I've met some really amazing people, and I've had some really truly sort of unforgettable experiences. The sort of most impactful interview I feel like I've done was an interview I did with R. Kelly, who is a relatively famous musician. I think most people sort of will have heard of him, or at least some of his songs. And I conducted an interview with him a few years ago now, before the Lifetime documentary Surviving R. Kelly came out. And it was a live interview with him, and for years and years there had been these sort of rumours of some pretty terrible sexual misconduct that he had been carrying out allegedly with minors. So this had been kind of, these were these rumours. They were also court cases that had been brought against him, and for years he'd sort of got a pass by the music industry, by a lot of different sort of components of society. And so whilst it was a challenging interview, like it was very uncomfortable for me to interview him, and I had to ask him some very difficult questions, and he was pretty rude to me and demeaning to me on air, and he was pretty sexist and misogynistic. I feel like it was the most meaningful interview I've done because it went viral, and people use that word a lot, right? Like, people go viral, and like, what does that mean? And you know, how sort of impactful is something when it goes viral. For this, it was, I think, impactful because it really sort of shone a light on the survivors, like on the people who were accusing him of these crimes, and it sort of helped. You know, it took a couple more years, but it kind of was one of those pieces in the puzzle that helped then more momentum being brought around a case that eventually kind of led to him being charged, and you know, he's sort of awaiting. I think he's awaiting trial right now, and it's sort of a slew of different charges against him. But yeah, I feel like that was probably my most impactful interview. Not necessarily one of my favorite interviews of all time, but like certainly my most impactful.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. I couldn't imagine being in your shoes. Our next question is actually also from a high schooler in Georgia, and they're wondering, love Georgia. They're wondering if writing just comes naturally to you, or did you kind of have to find your voice?
I have to say, I was one of those annoying people that writing did come naturally to me. I have to shout out my dear friend Hannah, like one of my best friends in high school, and she used to drive her crazy when I would be able to come in and like we would have a free period before you'd go to classes in high school, and you know, I don't recommend this. Definitely do your homework the night before or when you're supposed to. But I would come in and I would like write a 2,000 word essay, or I'd write an essay in that free period. And I would usually get pretty good marks for it. And, you know, she would drive her crazy because she did the right thing. She was the one who was diligent, and she spent time working before the assignment was due. But yeah, writing kind of came naturally. But I will say writing came naturally because I was a voracious reader. I've always been a voracious reader. I love books. I always have loved books. And I think I was just really lucky and fortunate that we had access to a library near our house in England, and it was like a kind of small little library, but it really is a kind of gateway. This was before the interwebs, so we can just Google and get books online like a lot of people can now. But there were no like audiobooks or anything like that. But yeah, the library was a huge part of my life. So I think that if you want to be, if it doesn't come naturally to you, and if writing is something you struggle with, I would say double down on your reading, because you will notice, even if it takes a little bit of time, you will notice an impact on your writing.
Amazing advice. Our next question, a little bit more general, but it's something that students and educators have all been curious about this month because it is Women's History Month. And yes, a lot of our classrooms and our schools have just been really interested in hearing perspectives from women in the workplace. And for you in particular, what is it like being a woman of color in journalism?
So it's always a difficult question because I'm half Iranian, so my background is mixed, and I'm dark, and I've definitely experienced in the past certain types of prejudice. I have to be totally honest off the bat. I pass in a lot of circumstances. So my brother, for example, is like darker than I am. He has experienced much more sort of virulent racism in the past than I have. But and I can't imagine for Black women and for particularly in this current period with coronavirus, what Asian Americans are going through right now. I mean, it's just so challenging. But for me personally, in my journey, one of the ways in which it manifested was actually around my name, which is, I know it sounds a bit silly, but so I was in college and I was really wanting to be a journalist. So I was taking journalism, and then I had a professor who asked me in front of a bunch of my classmates, well, so what are you going to do about your name? because my name is Caroline Modarressy-Tehrani, which I know is like, it's a little bit of a mouthful, but, you know, it has a ring to it, so, you know, people can say it. It's, you know, it's an ethnic sounding name, and I said to him in front of the class, what do you mean? What about my name? And he said, well, which one are you going to choose? Because no one is going to say that on TV. Like, you're not going to be able to say, no one's going to say that on TV, essentially implying that there was, like, no way I was going to be able to get a job in television if I didn't somehow alter my name, or like anglicize it in some way. And you know, I'm really glad that I did not take his advice. You know, because that's absurd. You know, like it's we this is a kind of globalized situation that we live in. We're living in a very interconnected world. You know, I live in New York City. It's like one of the biggest melting pots in the world, and you know, it should never be a barrier to entry. Like, your name, where you come from, your identity should never be a barrier of entry to any job, any career, whether it's journalism, whether it's, you know, pharmaceuticals, like whatever you want to do. Don't let anyone ever tell you that you can't do something from where you come from.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Our next question is coming from another high schooler, this one in DC. They're actually from a journalism program, and she wonders, yes, she wonders, have you ever struggled with self-doubt, and what do you do to overcome that?
Oh my God, like 10 times every day. Like, don't we all? Wait, Erin, you've got, come on.
Oh, like, yeah.
Right, okay, good. Like, it's not just me. Yeah, of course, everyone experiences self-doubt, and I think that if you are a human, if you're not a sociopath, you will experience self-doubt, and you know, it can be challenging, and especially when you're up against a deadline, or if you're, you know, working on a very complicated piece, and you know, it's the stakes feel high, which with a lot of the stories that I've done in the past, they do. You know, you want to make sure you're getting things absolutely correct, and you want to make sure your facts are right, especially in this day and age where a lot of journalists face, you know, the call from people in power, including the president of this country, that, you know, a lot of media is fake news, and I think that term can be very offensive to a lot of the wonderful journalists and people that are my colleagues that go out every day, in many cases sort of, you know, risking their personal safety to try and actually get to the bottom of some very important stories. So I understand how, you know, self-doubt, when the stakes can be high, you know, you don't want those thoughts creeping in, because you don't want to feel sort of, you know, crippled in any way, and not being able to move forward because of that feeling of self-doubt. I feel like remembering, like, this is just something that helps me, so I don't know if it'll help anyone else, but remembering where you were 5 years ago, in those moments, just taking a second to sort of like step back and think, okay, hang on 1 second. What was I doing 5 years ago? Where was I 5 years ago? Could I have imagined 5 years ago that I'd be here today? Who are the people who've taken chances on me that have got me here today? You know, like, what is the hard work I've put in that's allowed me to get to this point today? And I think sometimes just taking a second to sort of reflect on your journey, and, you know, Brits tend to be a little more sort of self-deprecating and sort of like, you know, oh, you don't want to sort of talk about yourself and that sort of thing. But I think sometimes just taking a minute and really giving yourself a little bit of, you know, kind of giving yourself some props and sort of thinking, actually, you know, I've come really far, and I've really achieved, and I've succeeded, and I've been in a difficult situation before, or I've been up against a deadline before, and I've done it, and I've succeeded, and I've managed to meet it. So, you know, trying to put away those thoughts of self-doubt, that can sometimes be helpful. And also talking to friends, like, you know, usually if I'm really sort of spiraling, if I speak to a friend, like one of my producers or a girlfriend of mine, they'll snap me out of it pretty quickly. So don't be alone with your self-doubt. That's another thing. Like, just feel that you're able to talk about it, because the chances are other people feel just like you do. They just shine it on maybe better.
Yeah, excellent advice. And you're exactly right. Nobody in the whole world hasn't experienced self-doubt. So I hope to that high schooler out in DC that you know that you're not alone, and maybe you can take some of these nuggets of wisdom and apply it and see how it goes for you. And
share them back to us. Like, we need to help you out.
All right, so this next question, I won't lie, actually comes from the DreamWakers staff, because as we were preparing for this interview, we were doing kind of a deep dive, a little bit of a stalk of your Instagram, and we noticed what an amazing bookshelf you have, which I can see behind you there.
I know, like, this
incredible.
Is my feminist shelf, but it kind of goes up because there are too many books for just one shelf, so it kind of goes up this step.
We just thought it looked amazing. So we have to know, what are you reading right now? And I think you touched on this a little bit earlier, but just how has being a good, voracious reader like yourself really helped you in your career?
So right now I'm reading this epic book, a biography about Frederick Douglass. So it won the Pulitzer Prize a couple of years ago. And, because I'm British and, I went to school in the UK for most of my life, we were not taught about sort of these integral figures in, the American history, like American fact, like this. It's amazing historical figures who actually sort of like are key in the fabric of American society. And, Frederick Douglass is somebody who sort of fascinated me. And I just think that his role in civil rights is just so potent and profound. And I think that you can often learn a lot about how to analyze issues today by looking at a historical kind of lens, looking through the historical lens and perspective. So I'm reading that book. It's a mammoth tome, though. It's like 780 pages or something. So it's been taking me a while, but it's worth it. I'm just like slowly chipping away. But it's a very, very good book. I highly recommend it. And then what was the second part of the question? You said about writing.
About reading, yes. How has being a good reader like yourself affected or been important to your job and your career path?
Oh my gosh! I mean, every day. It's like the ability to just read really quickly, so you can kind of get through mammoth reports if they land. Like, the government is just dropping this $2 trillion stimulus package, or essentially a stimulus package, around the time of coronavirus. So being able to quickly read and synthesize what you're reading and actually be able to then kind of extrapolate meaning and be able to then convey that to an audience in a fast way, in a clear way, in an accurate way is so important. And that is something that journalists do every single day. Like, again, it doesn't matter what kind of journalist you are, like which field of journalism you're in, whether you're in health, whether you're in sports, whether you're in politics, doesn't matter. Being able to get information, read it, distill it, synthesize it really quickly and effectively is just so important. So, reading is something we just do every day, and also just for fun. Like, Erin, I love it for fun. I mean, like, I love reading, so it's just sometimes it's nice. We're so bombarded with screens these days, and I know that a lot of people who are going to be watching are sort of like screen natives, like you were born with a cell phone in your hand. Like, we were back in the day where there were like fax machines and pages. So that shows how old I really am. But, I think that it's really useful sometimes to actually just allow yourself to switch off, to not get too wrapped up in the sort of news alerts that will come up on your phone or sort of social media, which, we've all gone down those spirals, we can go down those rabbit holes, but I think sometimes just being able to stop, sit down with a good book and just really immerse yourself, that can feel really, really good for the soul. So, yeah, I think that for work it's important, but also for mental health and pleasure, it's so important as well.
Amazing. I completely agree. Our next... What was that?
What are you reading?
I am actually reading something called How to Do Nothing. It's actually very similar to what you just talked about, how to kind of unplug from social media, how to feel like you don't have to be productive all the time and you can just focus on yourself, which I think is very important.
Wait, I love that. You've got to message me who it's by afterwards.
Absolutely. So our next question, I think, really hits home. I mean, I think everyone in my life has asked themselves this at one point. It comes from a middle schooler in Boston who just wants to know, how do you balance your work and your personal life?
Oh gosh, middle school, you shouldn't have to worry about this stuff. Middle school has probably got more social activities going on than I do, so they probably do have to worry about this stuff. The work-life balance, it's like I don't know who has achieved this mythical holy grail of being able to get it right and feel perfectly balanced and zen. I don't know anyone who has. I don't personally know anyone who feels that they've got the perfect work-life balance. I think as a journalist, there are sacrifices involved. I don't want to make it sound like this big noble thing, but when you are on assignment, or when, depending on the kind of journalist, if you're covering breaking news, you're going to miss people's weddings. You're going to miss family events. You are going to miss dinners. You're going to, be the person who has to blow off your friends at the last minute, and that will suck. And they will forgive you because they love you and you're friends, and you will make it up to them by cooking them elaborate meals, or, trying to spend time with them when you can. But I think there is some guilt sometimes that can come with work and trying to attain that balance. But I think one of the important things to do every day is sort of think, am I working to the detriment of my career, essentially? Sometimes you can get yourself to a point where you're working so much and you're so into, and you're so sort of, I don't know, into yourself and not really sort of thinking about the world around you, that actually it's not you're not being a very effective journalist. I think that a lot of the time, actually being out in the world and with your friends, you can actually get ideas for stories. You'll hear things that people will tell you. Being connected to people, that's sort of the essence of journalism. We're supposed to be a mirror of society, reflecting the conversations and dialogues and discourse that are happening in society. So, I think that trying to attain some semblance of work-life balance can also be helpful. I think if you feel more balanced in your personal life, you will then feel more fulfilled in your work life. But it takes time. I think exercise, eat well, try and get some sleep, make sure you speak to a friend at least once every couple of days so that you don't go crazy. But if this middle schooler has the answer, please tell us.
Please tell us. All right, so we have one last question. I wish we had more time. It really just flies when you're having a great conversation. But this one really just helps us kind of wrap everything up. It comes from a lot of actual students who wanted to know if they're interested in journalism, but they just don't really know where to start. Do you have any advice for them?
Wow, that's such a great question. I'm so glad that there are so many people who are interested in a career path in journalism, because really I can't imagine doing anything else. I feel like I'm the luckiest person. I feel so privileged to be able to do what I do. I'm so lucky to be able to, I get to talk to people for a living. It's you can't beat it. So, well done. You're already choosing the really good career path. Despite what I said about missing people's weddings, I think that one of the best ways of thinking about trying to kind of, like we were talking about before, breaking into journalism, one of the best ways of thinking about how to maybe make an inroad and start thinking about, well, what would a career in journalism look like for me, is actually reading biographies of journalists you admire. So one of the things that I did when I was younger, and you see people on TV and it looks like they've got everything down and they're so confident, and how did they get there, and they look amazing, and I could never be that way, and I don't know anyone in the industry, and how do you even start? Reading the biographies of journalists can be so helpful. I recently finished Marie Colvin's biography that Lindsay Hilton wrote, and Marie Colvin was a fantastic journalist. She wrote for the Sunday Times newspaper in the UK. She was actually an American-born journalist, and she lost her life tragically, unfortunately, covering the conflict in Syria. And Lindsay Hilton is a journalist in Channel 4 in the United Kingdom, and she wrote this fascinating, fantastic biography. I highly recommend if anyone is thinking about wanting to kind of do conflict journalism, to pick up that book. That's such a good one. And then, there are some amazing other people. I really admire people like Robin Roberts. I admire people like Lester Holt. I think people who have really sort of, who kind of we identify with the landscape of news. I think that there are some really amazing journalists out there, and reading their books and finding out, wait, how did they do it? Because most of the time you'll read someone's history and you'll realise, wait a second, they didn't know anyone either. they know everyone now, but when they started, they were from a town like mine. They had the similar resources as I do, which is not that many. And, I think that it can be really, really helpful. And it can also just help you kind of figure out what kind of journalism do I want to practice? Like, where would I want to be, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? So, I think that that's a really good start. And also just engage with journalists online. Like, we're creatures of the interwebs. Like, we're often just living online. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn. So if you're really interested and you want to have some advice or you want tips, reach out. Feel free to sort of message us, reach out to us. If we're busy, we'll get back to you, whenever we're not pulling our hair out and, racing it to the deadline. But for the most part, we love getting questions from people who are interested in wanting to pursue a career in it, and we're always open for the most part to give advice, and if we could be of any help, we would love to. So feel free, reach out to somebody that you really admire and ask them a question or ask them for a virtual coffee, and I think we'd be surprised. Most people are willing to give up their time because we're just excited that other people want to join us in this crazy profession.
Amazing advice. I mean, I wish we had more time to ask you questions right now, but I think that's a really, really great thing for our students to take away, that they can reach out and hopefully find someone who will do just this with them and have just a lovely conversation. So,
Erin, your questions have been so great, and all of the questions that all the students have sent in, thank you so much. It helps me to think about my own journey as well. So it's always lovely to engage and interact with people. And you can find me on Twitter @CaroMT. You can find me on Instagram. It's the same thing. Feel free to reach out. We're around. We're all staying home. If we're being good citizens, we're staying home. And, hopefully this crazy time will pass sooner than later. But, always happy to engage with anyone who has any other questions.
Amazing. Well, thank you just again for your time and for your willingness to answer all of these students' questions. And of course, to all the viewers who are at home, thank you for choosing to tune in and hearing all of the lovely things that Caroline had to share with us today. We just wanted to let you know, of course, that we are doing these every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, so you can tune in right here and hear more from all of our amazing Dream speakers. And if you ever miss them, we are posting them as videos on our Facebook page, so you can always check them out later. But I hope everyone has a great day, and that is all from us. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye. Thanks, Erin.